Thanks very much, Shiny, and thanks to all of you for making it in time. Manish, I know you were stuck in traffic. Just about
Delhi is
came in
having
time with
competition with Bangalore, so
you. Right.
I've been telling this to a lot of people for months and months. I think Delhi's traffic is a big trouble.
Yeah, especially
So
in
I'm
this
happy
area.
being a Bangalorean. We have some good competition.
So, in terms of Shiny's just made the kind of set the stage on the argument on or the debate or discourse around the India growth story. So I wanted to push that a little bit forward and begin by asking the panel and begin by asking you. Okay, we're hearing all this conversation around growth, around the talk around India and global capitals. Just before we got on board, before we started, Anisha, you were telling me that when you were traveling 3 or 4 or 5 years ago overseas in different conferences, China was talked about a lot more, and that conversation has changed a little bit in the last few years. The question I have is that where is this growth coming from? What is the demographic of this growth? What's the geography of this growth?
Yeah, so obviously our Prime Minister is one of our biggest influencer on the economy, on the FOMO, what he's creating across, at least for the startup ecosystem. But if you really ask me over the last 5 years, and I think Arjun and me are more consumer, we're seeing a lot of participation of tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 consumers, which is real India. They are spending much higher for consumer products, uh, which is a great sign ahead, at least for consumer brands like us, that real India is now participating in the blossoming of this economy. So at our end, I continue to say tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 is one of the largest signals which has a great story for us going ahead.
That, by the way, is something we see at Money Control too, in our audiences and so on, for people who are investing, people who are interested in stock market and so on. That demographic is shifting or expanding significantly to the tier 2, tier 3 and so on. Anisha, your perspective on this, in terms of how has the gender balance changed on this?
Yeah, first I'll start on the India growth story. I equate it to literally a startup. A startup doesn't see success overnight. You built the foundation, or any company, right? It's very similar. I started my journey in the startup ecosystem in 2009, 2004 is when I had my first company. So, you've seen the India growth story slowly build on itself. And now it's the homecoming. I always equated it to we were the ugly stepsister and suddenly we're the belle of the ball. And you're seeing that happen real time and play out. We're fortunate that we're on the forefront of it. One of the interesting things that we've seen happen alongside it is, and I know she capital, by de facto we get the gender question, and I'm going to address that as well, is the decision making or the buying power that has shifted in terms of the female workforce or founder. Actually yesterday somebody told me female mat kao, it's not right, women bolo. So I said okay. So the women workforce or even the women buying power, it's suddenly shifted. You're seeing that in the US. That happened about 6 years ago. They said a lot of the decision making in the households, but even for larger ticket items, was coming through from the women in the households. Now we're seeing that happen instantly here. These guys are consumer, they can tell you. I mean, with the rise of the Blinks and the Zeptos, a lot of that is not, it's just the women buying the stuff for the household. So it's a lot of consumer moving items that are happening. So I would request everybody to seriously look at what addressing and what messaging goes out, given that we're at AdTech, because there is a shift also in terms of the consumer base that is being addressed here.
So, that trend that you just outlined is apparent to us in many other linked parameters as well. So, for example, in the political domain, how people are voting, and the rising role of women within that, both in terms of turnouts, in terms of deferring choices, but also in all kinds of financial data, in terms of financial inclusion, and in terms of spending. So, Arjun, what's your sense of this?
Yeah, look, not so many people know it, but I'm actually a student of politics. I studied economics and politics in my undergrad. And I remember I was in college in 2011. The Indian ambassador to the UN came to our college and she was speaking to us. And I asked a question at that time. I said, hey, we're having this conversation. We're here in a global forum, but why are we as billion plus people not being able to stamp our authority? Like, why are we always at the back of the room and not engaging, right? And I think over the last decade, we've seen a significant change in that relation. I now represent foreign capital in India. My LPs are all in Europe. And when you talked about sort of China being talked about and China being where all the global capital was going, we have shut our operations in China and all that money is flowing to India. So I think there is a lot of inflow of capital. There's a lot of global interest towards the Indian economy, given that we are free, that we are growing, that we have a young population, an aspirational middle class. I think we have the recipe for a lot of success. As Anisha said, it is a startup, the foundation has been laid, but I think over the next 5 or 10 years, it's ours to lose. So everything will come here, Apple will come here to manufacture, global capital will come here to India with a lot of hope and dreams and expectation. And I can tell you, as a representative of global capital as well, our entire fund, our US teams, our Europe teams are all looking to us in India saying that, hey, you are going to be the sort of driver of growth going forward. And so it's in our hands to really sort of drive this. From a consumption standpoint, actually, we've seen some really amazing things happen in the e-commerce and digital domain, right? When COVID hit, I remember my parents didn't have Amazon accounts. My dad placed his first order on Amazon. My mom set up online banking and figured out how to use this thing called UPI. 3-4 years in, my dad has placed 50 plus orders on Amazon. He goes on his Instagram feed, buys from D2C brands. Now my mom, if some place doesn't have UPI, she looks at them and says, it's the 21st century, how can you not accept digital payments, right? So we're seeing these massive changes in leapfrog in behavior that are happening in the consumption ecosystem. Consumption is also getting democratized, right? Manish said tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 consumers. These consumers may not have had access to these products in offline retail, but digital allows the Muzaffarnagars, the Imphals, the Anantnags, and the Shillongs to get access to these products. And at Dr. Vedya's, we reached 16,500 pin codes in India, and we gave accessibility of these products to these consumers. So I think from a consumption standpoint, we're seeing lots of signs moving forward with the young population, the middle class, etc. And we'll see a lot of branded consumption happen over the next few years.
So, I was very amused when you were talking about your parents in terms of their shift in their behavior. And it kind of reminded me that my whole world kind of crumbled or changed when my dad, who was a news junkie, he stopped taking the newspaper. And I was like, how can you live without newspaper? Because he shifted entirely to digital consumption. He's reading far more than he was reading earlier, but he just switched entirely from physical to digital. And the point you were making about capital coming and all of that. So Apple, for example, is now 2% going to be higher in terms of production of smartphones this year as projected, about 11.3% or something this year, 2% more than what was projected. And what we hear from diplomats constantly is that the amount of weight or space on the table that India was getting on the same tables is very different today than even compared to 2 years ago. And that's because of a whole bunch of factors, economic and others. The question I wanted to ask you, Manish, is that in this growth story, what is the role of the startup ecosystem in that from where you sit?
So I think without startups, there's no juice in the economy. I continue to believe what Anisha said, that the foundation is laid. Let's think about when we started 10 years back to becoming a consumer brand, 300 plus crores in under 10 years. Just think about brands which we are competing with who are here for more than or close to a century, building revenues towards what a digital business can build. Just example, 100 crore brand used to be built in 26 to 27 years. Digital brands come and now beat it in 3 to 4 years, right? So things have dramatically changed. The startup ecosystem has changed. The way how consumers are buying, brands are selling has completely changed. So I think startups are here threatening to disrupt brands which have been here in the ecosystem for long. Brands like us who are almost a decade old now are threatened that the renovation and innovation also continues because newer startups are coming in and challenging brands who were created a decade back. So that churn's continuing to happen. And I think yesterday, one of our ministers said that, the employers in the country is dramatically reducing with younger founders coming on board because they are employing so many new talents in this country. So the whole demography is going to change over the next decade. I think the best part is yet not seen. I think in the next 5-10 years is something which is going to be really interesting to see how things will change. So I'm in the camp that a lot of brands which we thought are going to be here to stay are going to be threatened and challenged by startups on their existence.
So Anisha, you invest in a lot of companies. Do you share this perception in terms of the whole attitude to startups? Well, no, one is on the rise of startups as vis-a-vis the traditional players. The other, I think, the linked question to that is the number of people willing to get into the startup system and also to be employed within that. And how is that changing?
I mean, we're seeing it play out real time. And I think all of us are very fortunate for that, right? In 2009, when we started, there were maybe 10 of us that you could count. In totality, I think in 2012 they did, or 11, there were 350 startups. VCs were even fewer. We could count 5 VCs that we could all go out and shop around to. So it was a very different ecosystem. And I think it's just, and at that point, the Shah Rukh Khans and the Salman Khans of the world were celebrated. You've seen that do a complete 180. The startup world is suddenly the hero. You're seeing so many, whoever you talk to wants to be a startup founder, almost to the point where I think 2022 it got to a frenzy crazy stage. Everybody wanted to be a startup founder without a business idea. There was no logic. Everybody just knew, mujhe startup karna hai, because the Shark Tanks of the world were changing that, right? And so everybody aspired to be just a startup founder without even a business. So it's kind of cool to see it go through that shift. I don't think a lot of the India digital growth story that is there is because of this. You're seeing the excitement around the startup industry. I think in 2012 or 14, we went and talked about, Maidala having 38 million subscribers because we used to ride with telcos. And people just couldn't believe it in Europe because population hi nahi thi unki itni. But now it's a given that we have this, digital population that is riding, as Arjun said, everybody is leaning on it. The Bharat stack is reality and building out brilliant stuff for everybody as well. I mean, it's being used now by different countries as well. So I think the startup ecosystem has matured significantly. It's put us on the global radar, and I do believe that the government has also pushed a lot to make it happen. You see them actively championing it.
I mean, on that, for example, when you look at the government data, it was like 3 unicorns 5 years ago, 100 plus
There was
now.
1 unicorn in 2011.
Yeah.
And
But the question Arjun, I wanted to ask you, while there is a significant shift in the ecosystem, as Anisha has pointed out, how much of this is rah-rah growth and how much of it is there a danger of overhyping this a little bit?
Yeah, there was a danger, honestly, and I would say a lot of us have something to do with it as well. I drank the Kool-Aid. I sold my company in 2021, and when I sold my company in 2021, I remember putting a LinkedIn post, I think towards the end of 2021, that, and this was still COVID was around and digital consumption was going through absolute crazy numbers, and I put a post on LinkedIn saying, I buy everything online. Who buys anything offline anymore, right? And I think about 6 months later, I had a rude awakening, and offline came back and all of those things. So I think for a few years, we all started drinking our own Kool-Aid, and we started believing that startups are God's gift to mankind, and we have disrupted everything, and everything will be done by startups. Having said that, look, I think that things have come back a little bit to reality now, but we still have a massive place to play in the ecosystem from both a value creation standpoint as well as sort of taking forward the next generation of people, right? Anisha was saying that Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan were TV stars. We have TV stars sitting with us now who have been on an Amazon Prime show. I've seen Manish Bhai since 2017, since I emailed him to have a meeting in his office to mentor me with our startup, and he looks like a Bollywood star now, right? He's changed his look, he's changed his style, he's changed everything. So I think these are the heroes now. These are the people that the youth look at. These are the people whose Instagram reels by the swimming pool people are looking at every day and saying, I want to be this person, right? And I think that is very, very powerful if we look at what the graduating college student will do now as opposed to what they would have had in terms of inspiration, aspiration, and ambition 10 years ago, right? So I think, as Manish Bhai said, 26 years to build a 100 crore brand. Now we are beating our chest saying we built it in 5 years and 6 years. And the guys today are doing it in 2-3 years, right? So even we are now in some way going to be dinosaurs that will get disrupted again and again. And I think if you are to boil down to what this does for India, I think it keeps everybody on their toes. It keeps older startups on their toes, it keeps incumbents on their toes, and it really increases the sort of array of possibilities. Having said that, I would say that, you quoted a number for unicorns, and obviously there is lots of notional value being created. I think there will come a time very soon when this notional value will have to translate into real exits and real creation of value, real stock market listings, etc., all of that. That's the question that a lot of people are asking. It will happen, but how it happens and when it happens is important for us as an economy as we stand in the global ecosystem of digital companies and startups.
So that actually leads me to the next question, Anisha. Let me put this to you. While there is the growth of unicorns and the growth of the startup ecosystem, there's also serious questions around profitability versus growth. We are seeing that with Byju's, for example, and so on. So what's the reality check on this? Because there is a whole sort of growth Kool-Aid, to quote what Arjun was talking about. And then there is also the real economy. For example, at the GDP level, while we have different growth numbers, in real terms, the GDP is just about a few months ago come back to pre-COVID levels in actual size. So in terms of the startup ecosystem, this whole, how do you see this whole profitability versus growth argument and where we're going with that?
Look, everything needs some kind of correcting that has to happen at some point, all right? As Arjun alluded to it, there is a Kool-Aid that a lot of the founders were drinking. If you, as investors, I'll tell you, when we were, if you tried going to a startup in 2021, 2022, the valuations were insane. People were doing it on future revenues times, this, and just building out weird valuations. I think this correction needed to happen, not just for founders, for investors as well. And I think investors are equally as guilty of creating the hype that had happened. This correction is a great thing. It is something that has now led to real growth. Everybody's come back to ask, what is the right way to grow? If my acquisition cost is higher than what I'm getting out of the customer, the lifetime value, why am I doing this? Maybe I need to go offline, or maybe I need to go to, one of the quick commerce guys or whatever. And they started thinking through their marketing. And I don't think it's tightening of budgets. I think it's just in terms of even being sensible about where the money is being spent. Because investors are now questioning. It's coming down to, are you going to be profitable? All businesses are built on profitability. There's a great book, by the way, on this, Dhando Investor. If anybody gets a chance, please read it. But all foundation of any business has to be, at the end of the day, growth and profitability. How long can we? And I think now the startup ecosystem is maturing. It's coming to that realization. And not just the unicorns, but even the early stage guys are being asked for key metrics that matter to the drivers of growth and how they're going to sustainably grow.
Manish, yeah, exactly.
So I don't think so any founder you meet who wants to raise money and burn. It does take time for profitability to come in place where you want. In our case, I was profitable, and Arjun will also know, at a large scale, we were profitable. But there's a time when you have to go and invest into the future of the business. And that's where sometimes profitability, when you plan it, might happen in a couple of years, takes 3 to 5 years. But I can assure you, nobody wants to raise money and burn money. That's not the culture. Most of the founders are very cognizant about building it for the long term, but it takes time. And when you're on a path of investment, as well as building an organization, the knee jerk of reversing it at scenarios is a tough one. But it's right what Anisha is saying. At our end, over the last 12, 18 months, it's more towards profitability, better unit economics. We'll dial up for growth at a later stage. It's all about the long term. But it's good to get that in the ecosystem. Anisha and me have done a few deals together where even smaller companies, we're pushing them at early stages that, hey, this is not an environment where you can go all guns blazing on a cash burn. Because in the environment, I think even Arjun can top it up. It's not I mean, I was speaking to one of the bankers a couple of weeks back. He says this is worse than Lehman Brothers crisis, what we're seeing right now. And we see it, right? Because this is a buyer's market completely. All are looking for sharky deals.
I disagree though a little bit with him. And
You don't,
no,
when did we ever agree?
you know, I think majority of founders, you know, are not looking to burn. But I do think that there was a frenzy that not just the
And it's
founders.
also our fault.
Yeah, so I'm saying, I'm again, Validi, not just the founders, investors
Guys,
too.
I'm a founder. We're
You know,
risk
would
takers
just.
at the end of the day.
No, it's our
If
fault
it
as
pays
well.
off, you guys clap. If it
Arey,
doesn't pay off,
we're not saying it to
then
you.
we
We're
guys
not
get
saying it to
beaten.
you.
I'm a founder still.
We
You
are
guys
founders too.
investors.
No, I'm a founder. I founded She Capital, the third time
Founder
founder.
investors.
No, please. Anyway, but the fact is, majority of the founders, I think, didn't, you know, are just looking for sensible growth. But it was our fault, everybody. I think, in general, the startup industry went through such a hype that founders were pushed to burn,
We've
or
seen
do
what's
anything
happened
to
in the
grow.
tech industry, right? I mean, we've seen what's happened.
No, look, I think basically founders are well-intentioned people, right? They are well-intentioned people. Now, if you go to someone who is 25 years old or 24 years old or 23 years old, and that person is coming to you for 4 crores, and you say, actually don't take 4, take 25 and see what happens. I mean, it's not that person's fault if they burn through the 25 as well. So I think that's what happened. I remember at that time in 2021, there was a company that had barely got a presentation, but in the WhatsApp groups it became really hot, and then you'd have to beg that founder for a meeting, and then they'd say, hey, end of the call, you tell me whether you're committing or not. And I think that frenzy was actually unhealthy for founders, for investors, for ecosystem, etc., all of that. I said one thing earlier, right? Notional value is great, but your last valuation multiplied by your stake is not your net worth as an investor or a founder. There is a massive difference between cash out and cash in. When you have to sell your stake in a company versus you have to put money in a company, there's a massive difference. But I would say one thing, right? I think, as Anisha said, it's good that this has come because the fundamental reason to do business eventually is to make money and make profit and have a sustainable P&L. I would say that from all the folks in the ecosystem, our consumer guys are actually the first ones to pick this up and build those more sustainable P&Ls, and it may be a function of the
But
business.
Arjun,
as
no
well.
more, Arjun. The differentiation has now become caught up.
No. But our consumer
no
guys,
more.
consumer guys are closest to building healthy P&Ls in
Consumer
the
business
startup
is
ecosystem.
always
So I
great.
think
Of course.
this
High gross
panel
margin.
is kind of representative of the debate within the ecosystem in that sense. The question, I mean, would it be fair to say that, look, there was a time of where there was a lot of frenzy around this in the way that you pointed out, but there's a lot more realism now?
Yeah, so 2021 and 22, everyone went to the bar to get drunk together. 2023 was the hangover, and 2024 we'll see what happens.
Morning after.
Yeah, morning after, hangover, whatever you may call it. But I would say that, like, founders are well-intentioned people. They want to build really good businesses. It's everybody's responsibility. It's the media's responsibility as well. We all put those founders on the pedestal. You mentioned the name of Byju's. He was the best, biggest, most celebrated startup founder for a very long time by
In fact,
everyone.
even with what's happening with the RBI and the SEBI now in the last, say, last month or so in the case of Paytm Bank, for example, a lot of startup founders wrote to the finance minister publicly saying that, look, these, and that was rebuffed in terms of that some of these actions may be a detriment to the larger ecosystem. And the RBI was very clear on what it's doing. So, I mean, no judgment on what's happening and so on, but there is a larger conversation happening at multiple levels around the startup ecosystem too. Now, I think we're running out of time. So, in terms of, I think we started with this whole the India growth story and how it's perceived globally. And Anisha, you had something to say about that. The question that I wanted to ask you again is that while the importance of India may have grown, but are we in danger of also overestimating it? Because, you know, for often there is a temptation. Somebody once said to me, you know, we are world famous, but only in India. So how real is that?
Well, I think it's with every passing day, it's less and less real, as this person said, because it is that we are slowly becoming world famous. Okay, I think in If you looked at it, and when I was speaking globally in 2015, nobody cared. Nobody. You know, we were just there. We were the token brown person in the room, and that was it. I think it's changed drastically, and we should pat ourselves on the back rather than say, you know, are we at number 3 position? Are we at number, yeah, do we have ways to go? Absolutely. There is a lot that has to done. You can see it in the, and I'll only talk about it from the startup ecosystem, but even the public markets. I think the public markets are going crazy right now, rallying, helping us a lot in terms of, you know, what is going on globally. The startup ecosystem, it's come to a maturing point. Investors at one point didn't want to invest. Now they really wanted to invest. Suddenly they're holding back, as Manish said, because, you know, everybody's trying to understand where is the real point, okay? I think we've come to that mature point that we're all looking for, okay? At least I believe that. I think if you want to start up, there is no better time. And there is no better time to be any other place than India. I was just in Silicon Valley with some of my friends. They sound so dismal and sad. I was across Europe. Everybody sounds okay. You know, the London ecosystem isn't doing that well either. So I'm okay with currently, now, at this real point, drinking my own Kool-Aid and saying, yeah, you know what, we did a good job. It's time to say, give us a pat on the back and say, yeah, we're growing, and we're growing solidly.
Yeah, I would agree with what she's saying. I hope we don't get to an overheated economy. I mean, going back, I'm hearing about any company who's making 30, 50 crores EBITDA is preferring to go IPO than taking money from private equity or venture capitalists. So things have changed. It has, I read that article, it makes sense. I mean, go for it. It's like where it is. But I think next 10 years, ours clearly, and anybody wants to be a startup founder. Okay, let me talk about when we started. We had 35,000 brands competing on Amazon. Today I compete with 2 lakh brands online. Things have changed. But I can bet there's 1,65,000 who have come as Me Too's, don't have a differentiation. Why? So anybody is looking at being a startup founder, great time. Have a very clear differentiator, why you should exist and what are you making. And do you think you'll survive for the 10 years on what you're building? Right? So that should be where it is. But I can tell you one thing, startup journey as a founder is one of the best journeys. It looks cool. You'll have so many ups and downs which are phenomenal. I've seen many. It's the best time to jump in now. I still believe China has got a good competition with us. You can't write them off, but India is in a very, very good position to get started with. So I encourage a lot of my team members who say, I want to become a founder. Yeah, I'm encouraging you. That's where we are. But
Arjun, the last word to you.
Yeah, look, I'm very patriotic, so maybe I'm very biased. I wear this band with the Indian flag on my hand. I've been wearing it for the last 13 years. But in 2014, I almost lost my job. I was working at a global fund, and we had operations across Asia and Europe. And they were going to shut down the India office because it was like just not a place that we saw ourselves investing. Fortunately, they kept the office open. I kept my job. Eventually, I started up and moved on in life. But I think that's not the case anymore. That's not there anymore. I think, yeah, maybe there is overestimation, overhype. But then if you don't dream, then where do you go, right? Like, why not sort of have this rhetoric and dialogue? We have been famous for actually under-hyping ourselves. So now that we have this opportunity, we must do it. Look, the recipe for success is in front of us, right? 1.4 billion people. I think the other interesting thing is, when my global teams talk to me, sometimes they say, hey Arjun, you're delusional. Like, why are you so optimistic? Why are you so enthusiastic? I'm like, come to India and go outside of Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, right? Go to a Surat and Ahmedabad and Indore or Jaipur. They don't even know there is this global recession happening, right? We are a domestic consumption economy. For a lot of things, we are not dependent on the rest of the world. We have such a large burgeoning middle class. Like, I was looking at the National Household Consumption and Expenditure Survey, and urban India, clothing, bedding and footwear, average per month expenditure is 463 rupees. When I asked people, they said 10,000, 5,000, 2,000. That's the amount of growth that is available ahead of us, right? Like 460 rupees, nothing. It's $5 that urban India on average is spending on clothing, bedding and footwear. So I think there is lots of scope, there is lots of opportunity, the foundation is laid, and now it's ours to sort of make good for the promises we have made. But yeah, we are making promises and we are hyping ourselves, so actions speak louder than words, right?
So let's just take a couple of questions and any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Just a second, sir. I'm just going to pass the mic to you.
So Arjun, you were mentioning about that 460 rupees a month is what people are usually spending for clothing, bedding and footwear. So on the same lines, what are the advertising opportunities available for the industries, in these segments or the others? So what are the low-hanging fruits in the advertising space? If you can give any insights on that.
Yeah, look, I would say that if you ask any consumer founder at least, CAC is at an all-time high. I used to acquire customers at 270 rupees for a 720 rupees, 750 rupee average order value in 17, 18, 19. I know that that same order is at least 2 if not 3x in terms of the amount of CAC. The biggest problem that at least brands using the digital ecosystem are facing is in the traditional channel of performance marketing. There is massive increase in CPMs,
So you're saying
becoming
that,
unsustainable for brands.
So you're saying that brand advertising is taking over as compared with performance because people
No,
want...
so I think if you're able to offer brands unique solutions in top of funnel, in conversion focus, or in actually getting organic traffic, and I had a very interesting company talk to me about a new way to approach SEO, where everybody's approaching SEO with blogs, but they are actually approaching SEO with topical content. So if something happens, in 2 hours they'll put up an article because they're like, blogs everybody will do on that topic, but this topical content will increase organic traffic significantly, right? So you have to think out of the box, understand the problem that the brands are facing and see if you can solve this, because if the CAC is equal to the average order value, then first order, maybe second order, you're losing money, and investors are not giving that much money to burn any longer.
So basically, since CAC is increasing, advertisers are, or the companies are willing to put in more money for innovative solutions.
For different things. Because Manish can't keep
I
putting money down that rabbit hole.
You're going to see brands going back to traditional way of marketing. That is what we are doing over the last 12 months.
So brand advertising, right?
Yeah, you're
More than
you're going to
performance,
see
brand
digital
advertising.
brands who build businesses on digital, now going back to traditional way of marketing. And you're seeing this across, not only in India, but you're seeing it globally too.
So traditional basically means brand, like
Back
brand
to old
oriented.
age marketing.
Yeah.
But I think there's an opportunity for advertisers here to disrupt it. Anybody who can figure that out, because as he said, for investors, that's where everybody's pinching down on their portfolio companies and saying, show us that. So as long as advertisers can solve that pain point, you got it set.
So can you expand a bit more by what you mean by traditional marketing in this context?
So obviously, I mean, we never advertise on television, and over the last 2 years, our massive burns have been on the ATL spend, because you're building so much of air cover on the upper funnel, which is expensive, right? The old way of, I think the privacy change of Apple in 2020, when was it, Arjun?
2020.
I think it changed digital marketing forever. I think we're still not realistic that time's done now. Brands will have to re-innovate the way how they build demand. And we are also, I mean, I'm being honest here, we are also struggling to see it over the last 12, 18 months, which is your best next playbook, because the playbooks of the past need a lot of renovation and reinvention of how it's done. So you're seeing a lot of digital brands which were built online. Now for the next leg of growth, because Meta and Google are no more effective their way how they used to, you're going back on building traditional marketing.
I'll give a simple explanation. So Manish Bhai said that basically there were 35,000 brands in 2015-16 on Amazon, right? Then they became 2 lakh brands. Supply of ads remains the same, right? You're using the same supply of ads. The demand of ads has grown 6x, 10x, 15x, etc. all of that. So when I met him in 2017 and 18, the only conversation we had was, how do I make my Amazon ads more efficient? How do I make my performance marketing more efficient? Manish Bhai was not wearing these kind of clothes. The office was very simple, very plain, white, and he was just talking numbers and performance. Now he's at Filmfare with Karthika and Rashmika Mandana and doing those ads, right? Because he has to build the top of funnel because this ecosystem has 6x, 10x the amount of competition. And so now brands need to build differentiation because there are 50, 100, 200 personal care brands selling the same products as his. And so he has to find a new way to engage with the customer.
I'll just do the last one. I used to acquire a consumer for 30 bucks in 2015, 2016. It's changed now. It's more than 700, 800 bucks. So things have changed dramatically.
Which is more or less similar to what Arjun was saying. So we're completely out of time. Thanks very much, and a big hand, ladies and gentlemen, to this excellent panel. Thank you.